بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We begin with the praise of Allah Ta'ala. We ask and beseech Allah to send His peace and blessings upon His final messenger, upon His family, His companions, and all those who follow His way until the day of judgment. We ask Allah Ta'ala to make us amongst them. Ameen. So alhamdulillah, I'd like to welcome you all, our Muslimin and visitors who are coming here, inshallah, for this program. We'll be having this program every single Monday, inshallah, as it relates to the Seerah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So it's going to be based a little bit unique in that we're not going to be starting with Surah Al-Baqarah or Surah Fatiha and Surah Al-Baqarah, for example. We'll be studying according to the general order of the revelation of the surahs. Shaykh Yusuf will go into that a little bit more detail. But inshallah, so it's connecting with the events of the Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So inshallah, something a little bit unique, 45 minutes every Monday. We'll also be having every Thursday, inshallah, a fiqh class as well. Same thing, right here in the Musalla, open to the community, no tuition, nothing of that nature. So join us, inshallah, bring your families. Sisters who are present, inshallah, they're welcome to come to the front of the sisters area because we do have a presentation, which I'll fix in a minute. We do also have this recorded live on YouTube as well as our Facebook page, Islamic Learning Foundation, or ILF Chai, C-H-I. So inshallah, you guys are welcome to see that. So I don't take too much time away from the program. I just wanted to introduce Sheikh Yusuf Rios. Sheikh Yusuf Rios is our resident scholar with Islamic Learning Foundation, and he's in Chicago. He's been teaching a number of classes over the last 6 months or so. And alhamdulillah, we have an opportunity now to present some programming to the public as well on a weekly basis. Sheikh Yusuf Rios has his shahada from the university, Islamic American University in Detroit. And then thereafter, he went to study at Azhar in Egypt for a number of years amongst some of the leading scholars of Azhar University, with a special emphasis in Islamic fiqh or Islamic jurisprudence and the usul of fiqh. So alhamdulillah, you have your opportunities to continue, get some opportunities to learn, inshallah, and benefit from Sheikh Yusuf. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to him. Jazakallah.
You're going to do both? بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. يا ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا اللي قد ظلمنا أنفسنا ولا يغفر للذنوب إلا أنت ونعوذ بك من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ونعتمد عليك ونتوجه إليك ونتوب إليك ونستغفرك ونصلي ونسلم على الذي أرسلته بالهدى والبيان. أما بعد. So we wanted to focus on reflection of the Quran. And Arif, can you please be the timekeeper? And we wanted to focus on a Quranic reflection from the angle of becoming familiar with the surah of the Quran as they were revealed. So this is kind of like, for instance, those of you who have been married, before getting committed, you want to know something about the person. And so you get a general idea about the person and you get some, characteristics about what's going on in the person's life before you make that commitment. And then after you make that commitment, as is our custom and our practice and our obligation as Muslims, then after that we begin to become more, acquainted with the details of the person. In that same type of spirit, we want to gain a general understanding of the Quran before we become committed to the details of the ayat. Sometimes what happens is that when we become familiar with the surah of the Quran, we're focusing on one ayat of the time and we kind of lose the big picture. So we go into the details and we start to drown without getting an understanding of the general personality of the surah. So one of the things, and it's not without its controversy, but some of the ulama, they saw that it was needed to understand the Quran as it was revealed, as opposed to as it's presented in the Mus'haf. What's the difference between the two? The Quran as is presented in the Mus'haf and the Quran as is revealed. What's the difference between the two? Does anybody have an idea on that?
It talks about Tawheed first and first almost 10, 13 years, and then it goes to Ahkamat of the Quran and the rulings and things.
Okay, so then that puts us in the categorization of, in the sciences of the Quran, looking at the Quran from the idea of Mecca and Medina. But more specifically, when the Quran was revealed, what was going on? Was the Quran just revealed like that? Just to the people? Or was there some purpose behind it? No, we don't have, we're not in an environment of punishment here. This is the issue of, we're in the process of reflecting and learning.
Something happened at that time.
Yes.
And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was thinking, before he thinks, Allah has revealed, he has put forward the circumstances, and then afterwards Allah revealed that surah,
Yeah.
those ayah,
Yes.
and then it really connects like in Badr or
Right.
or whatever was happening on the battlefield before that. Allah has given some instructions to Muslims
Hmm.
and do or don't do this or you don't do that, be over here, you will be helped by those
Nusra of Allah.
and those so and so on. So these are the first. It happened on that place, Mecca or Medina, and then Allah revealed, and this revelation came according to all these happenings that happened, and surahs were
Being revealed in that regard. So we'll come back to that point. These 2 points that were mentioned are extremely important. When we look here, we see that it says that he used to devote, we start from here, so it's maybe a little, he used to devote most of his time, and really the Rahiq al-Makhtoum, this is from Rahiq al-Makhtoum, which is a book of Seerah. It's a book of the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It went through some critical edition because the English version is not as beautiful as the Arabic. But in Ramadan, before Nubuwwah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to take some time out and to engage in ibadah and meditation. Some of the ulama, they say that the Arabs had inherited the practice of ibadah that was there with Ibrahim and Ismail alayhim as-salam. The details of that are not known with exactitude of what that entailed, or what that was like. But that's not so much important for us, right? But to know that he engaged in some act of ibadah that was legitimate, that was established from before, that had to do with Tawheed, that's important. And to know also that Ramadan was a month that was sacred in the past, prior to the revelation of the Quran. So we find, okay, this is the context in which the Quran is initially revealed. The Prophet ﷺ goes to the cave of Hira. He's engaged in some sort of act of ibadah. But this is always, and I emphasize this constantly to the brothers when we're together and we're reflecting on the knowledge of Islam. It says his heart, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was restless about the moral evils and the shirk that were rampant among his people. But at this point, he was helpless. Why? Because he had no definite course, no specific approach to be able to address the situation. To be able to address the situation of his community. Right? This is the reality which he faced. The Quran was revealed with that state of heart, that he was restless. And also in this environment, that there was a complete breakdown in the society, right? That was the context. And so, for instance, when we talk about Medini or Medini, the brother, Mecca or Medini, the other brother left, but he participated in sharing that information. We're looking at the context in which the Quran is revealed. Because we want to know this type of information. When the Quran was revealed, what was the human condition? What was going on? Then we're able to relate.
Sure. They were not focusing on one God.
Yes, the issue of shirk is mentioned here in the English idolatry, but it's shirk. But it's not only shirk, it's also other moral breakdowns. Also other issues. Your oppression, when we look in the details, basically we're talking about the backdrop of that is Jahiliyyah. The period of Jahiliyyah. It's super important to study the backdrop of what was going on in that time period. Because even though here, in this situation, there's not a lot of details, there's other books that list what were the details of Jahiliyyah. It's important because that gives us a sense of understanding, of how to navigate in the world. In reality, like when we talk about this issue of moral evils and shirk and so on and so forth, these things take place today. When we talk about moral evils and breakdown, and here it says it was rampant among the people, it was widespread. There was problems with the marriages, there was problems with dignity, there was problems that were economic, all of those things, and I mentioned that before, maybe in khutbahs or in talks, but this is the environment in which the Quran is first revealed. That's the first thing. The second thing here is that it says that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to devote most of his time, in Ramadan in specific, to take a break. Some of the ulama, and rightfully so, they mentioned that this is important. Not only in Ramadan. Not only in Ramadan, this is important to take a break from the problems. To take a break from the issues that we confront. That's the first thing that we want to talk about that's necessary in today's time. We have too many problems. Too many issues that are overwhelming. We feel like that. What to do? Even though we have the Quran and the Sunnah. We have that. We feel sometimes, what do we do? Where's the unity of the Muslims? What's the solution? I'm an individual. It's beyond my capacity. We have that same type of experience. But we have to remember that when the Quran came at this point in this environment, it was an overwhelming breakdown in society. And we're seeing that in today's time. So the two things here is, one, this is the backdrop of the first revelation of a disoriented, broken down society. The second thing was the issue that the Prophet ﷺ took a time away from that and he began to reflect and engage in ibadah. Some of the ulama, they say that's still valid from the angle of what? It's still valid from the angle of renewal. Most of us, like right now, I just got a text. One of the imams called me, one of the imams close to me, says one of the imams, what happened in Texas last night? Tornado. So, okay, how did he know that? Media? Okay, you see media, general story, right? Okay, so now I'm connected with that general story because one of the imams, his best friend, lost everything. Lost the house, lost the cars, lost everything. So the story goes from being general to being what? Now more close to home. That's one instance. When we talk about war situations, when we talk about, refugee cases, when we talk about, the world problems. So it becomes necessary here to take that break and start to look at, for instance, how we can renew ourselves and how we can be in a better position to address the issues. This surah is labeled as a surah that's Mecca, right? And just for simplicity's sake, the categorization of the Quran into Meccan, or that which was revealed in Mecca, and that which was revealed in Medina, really it has to do with that which was revealed. Yeah. Yes, this was prior. Here is mentioned that he was engaged in some sort of act of worship, and yeah, according to the way of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, the details we don't know. It's something that is like it's not beneficial to go into the details, right? In that regard, but some scholars have said that even this, well, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam continued this practice in Ramadan, but some scholars have said, alayhi salatu wasallam, they said that this type of approach is still viable in any time. Right? And I mentioned that specifically because we have so many issues that a lot of us are breaking down. Nobody talks about that. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming that you have, for instance, somebody back home in your family in the village, the landslide issue. My auntie, she got cancer. Now I have to go because she has, her sons are not around. And my home, my children are going through you see what I'm saying? It becomes compounded, right? Recently, in one of the states, a Muslim family was in one of the shopping centers, and there was some, anti-Islamic issue that takes place. So we're overwhelmed. So that break becomes necessary in any time to kind of get a perspective on life, get a perspective on where things are going, on how to get a grasp of things. And so this surah, is a Mecca surah. And so we were talking about the Mecca-Medini division, for simplicity's sake, and as we continue, we'll go into more detail. But the division between Mecca and Medini has to do with what was revealed before Hijrah and what was revealed after Hijrah. So what was revealed before Hijrah is considered or labeled as Mecca. And what was revealed after Hijrah is labeled as Medini. And that has to do with classifying the Quran according to what? Time, not place. You with me? Because if we say Mecca, the first thing comes to mind is what? Huh? No, it was revelation, but we think place, right? It was revealed in Mecca. If we say Medini or Medina, we think what? It was revealed in Medina. But that's not the logic. That's not the reasoning of the ulama. Because when they say before Hijrah or after Hijrah, it could be in any geography. Right? And then there's more details. If it was revealed while the Prophet was traveling, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if the Prophet was a resident, if it was revealed in the winter, if it was revealed in the summer, we've go into all of those details to show that in Islam there was a lot of work that was done to be sure that when we say we believe in this, the life of the Prophet is authentic information. The Quran, we have an understanding. In other words, we have a sense of certitude or certainty that we're dealing with truth. The Muslims, it wasn't just like they just accepted anything. The Muslims made sure that, okay, we're saying this is Quran. How do we know it's Quran? We're saying this is revelation. How do we know it's revelation? We're saying that this is truth that hasn't been changed. How do we know it's truth that hasn't been changed? They took the steps to go through all of that process to make sure that what we get at the end of the day is what? Is the full reality and is something that's authentic as far as revelation. So here, the interesting thing about this surah is that is revealed in Mecca, and usually in Mecca, in the Meccan phase, just for simplicity's sake, it's focusing a lot on issues of belief, who Allah is, and the unseen. And it's telling us about ourselves in the world, the natural environment. How should we think about nature? A lot of times we don't think about that side. We only think about Aqidah being only about Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, who Allah is, how to worship Allah. But when we talk about, for instance, the natural world, how do we understand the natural world? Right? That's important. Why? Because where does the natural world come from? Yeah. We should not have a doubt about that. Where does the natural world come from? Did it just exist? It was created. Where did the Quran come from? Yeah. So both are from Allah, the revelation and the creation. Revelation and creation are from Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So here the interesting thing is that this surah has two names. What are the two names? The first surah that was revealed, what is it? And what's the other name for it? Surah Al-Alaq. And what else? What's the beginning of the surah? What's the beginning of this? Iqra. So it goes by both names. So here the names have some, it has some value. The first name, if we were to say Alaq, is dealing with what? What is the Alaq? Not the Most High. What is the Alaq? Huh? It's a blood clot, but it's the creation. It's the creation. So Alaq is telling us about the origins of the human being. Who has watched the stages of development of life within the womb, like for instance on YouTube or anything like that? Who has seen it? You seen it? No, health class is terrible. But YouTube, this is traumatizing sometimes. I don't know what your experience was, but all my kids are just like traumatizing. But when you look at, for instance, some YouTube videos are awesome because they show the process, the developmental process, in a fast way. Like rather than, it doesn't take place overnight. It takes place over months. But when you see it, when you even hear the story from the beginning, from the scientific side, for instance, when you look at right from the very beginning, even if you talk about, for instance, the bodily fluid, scientifically what we call sperm, the chances of that one sperm fertilizing the egg are what? What are the chances? Yes. That by itself is what? That by itself is miraculous. That by itself is miraculous. Right? The chances of surviving all of that and then going into the process of development. So that's the first thing. That the surah, it makes us reflect on our origins, and we know that the created order is in control of who? Is in control of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Is in the control of Allah, we should say. What does the surah begin with? First ayah. Iqra what? Right? When you think about the word Rabb, that we said the alaq, it goes through stages, right? The word Rabb is not just that Allah created, but Allah created in stages, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala maintains the development and is purposeful. So when you think about, when you reflect on the creation and when you reflect on Rabb, you get such a solid meaning of who Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is, right? That you gain in confidence with regard to, how many minutes? Okay, you have so much confidence with regard to the creation, with regard to its maintenance, right? With regard to its purpose. It builds a solid foundation in that regard. The other name is Iqra. Iqra is what? Huh? Read is what? What kind? What is it? Is it a suggestion, a command, or what? What is it? It's a command. What is it? It's a command. So for here, this name Alaq, it tells us about the creation. It indicates about the creation. If we take the other name, it tells us about legislation. The first thing that was legislated, that was commanded, that was ordered, was this process of reflecting, right? This process of learning the Quran and reflecting, and it's a process which is not only the issue of reflecting upon revelation itself, which is the Quran, but also reflecting upon the world, right? So here, in the short period of time, but let's just get this point in. This sort of has two parts. The first part consists of the section of ayat, which is 1 through 5, and the second is ayat 6 through 19, right? The first part, the scholars agree that it forms the first part of Revelation, right? That's really when we start talking about is the first surah to be revealed. We're talking really about those first 5 ayat. We're talking about those first 5 ayat. In the hadith from Aisha, which is related by Imam Ahmed, Bukhari, Muslim, and others, is related by a number of different ways, is the most authentic in this regard. Aisha radiallahu anha, who is our mother in deen and knowledge, has related the full story of the beginning of revelation, as she herself heard it from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Besides this, Ibn Abbas, Abu Musa al-Ashari, and a group of companions are also reported to have stated that these were the very first verses of the Quran to be revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The second part was sent down afterwards when the Prophet ﷺ began to perform the salah in the precincts of the Kaaba, and Abu Jahl tried to prevent him from this with threats. The problem here is this, and we end on this note. When we say Mecca Medina division, sometimes when we get sloppy with knowledge, not detailed principles, not really thinking about it, we say, well, the Mecca is talking about the unseen, and it's talking about the nations that came before, it's talking about Iman, it's talking about Tawheed, and the Medini is talking about rules, and it's talking about, community and so on and so forth. But we find here that in the beginning of the da'wah, early on, there was salah that was prescribed. It may not have been full blown, but there were some rules that were there. You see what I'm saying? So sometimes the classifications of the scholars are just taking in a general way, and then with more knowledge, we understand how to, apply it with detail. You get what I'm saying or no? In this regard, that's important. Why? Because when we start talking about our own development, it's important to understand that salah is part of this reality in the beginning of the da'wah, right? That salah, our relationship with Allah Ta'ala is not just the issue of meditation or just belief. Some people will say, we have to focus on Aqidah, and they're talking about theoretical Aqidah. Here, there's a practical reality. The practical reality is getting to know who Allah is through the act of worship and also reflecting upon the universe. We definitely end with saying this. This part of understanding the creation is from Allah, and how to reflect upon the creation so that it comes back to Iman is very important. Why? Because this is where our children get lost with science and the ideas of atheism. They separate between belief and the rest of the world. The creation has to be understood in light of Iman. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم والحمد لله رب العالمين. Okay. What do you guys think? Everybody, you want to cut it short for this one and we come back? Huh? Okay. And so when we look at the first part, we said that the first part is what? Is the first 5 ayat. That without a doubt is known to be that which was first revealed. So the surah, we break it down into the 2 groups, 1 through 5, ayat 1 through 5, that was revealed first without a doubt. And then the second group is 6 through 19, and that was revealed after Surah Al-Mudaththir, or even maybe after that. Some of the scholars, they look at the contents of the contents of the Quran, and then they try to classify. Maulana Maududi, he does that from the angle of, if you look at the Tafhim that he compiled, and when he introduces the surah of the Quran, he tries to pair the surah of the Quran with the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Much like we did here, this is the backdrop in specific of this surah. It just happens to be that this is also the beginning of the seerah, right? But this is the backdrop here in which when we start talking about the cave of Hira and we start talking about Jibreel and when did Nubuwwah come and we start talking about Jahiliyyah, the seerah introduces us in the beginning directly into the Quran, right? It gives us that backdrop. So the first 5 ayats were revealed early on, and the second group is said after Mudaththir or maybe after that. Here it says in the Tafhim, the second part of this surah was revealed when the Holy Prophet ﷺ began to perform the prayer in the way legislated by Islam in the Kaaba, and Abu Jahl threatened and tried to prevent him from this. Who was Abu Jahl? Who was Abu Jahl? And his uncle, and what was the position that he took? Was he supportive of the deen?